All right, this is the primatology final exam. Just a quick prelude here. This video is not meant to be entertaining and is related to my knowledge maintenance. This is my final exam for my primatology knowledge. If you're interested in voting on whether or not I should pass this course, give this video a thumbs up if you think I should pass, and if you think I should fail, thumbs down and comment what I need to improve. So there's no notes here. Anything I say could be incorrect. This is all off the dome, and this is, again, an attempt to test my knowledge. Okay, so let's do it. So scope of curriculum. So the main thing is 8 primatology, especially focused on kind of case study style where I'm investigating individual species. The actual taxonomy and relations between species are a little bit outside of the course. Old world monkeys, you'll see there's quite a few old world monkeys, and then a little bit of origin and history, although this is, if I was to revisit this topic, would be something I spend more time learning about. Okay, origin of primates. So primates are first found right after the late Cretaceous. So this is kind of like about 60 million years ago. We see the first fossil evidence of primates. They're pretty small and arboreal, but after that time, they start to diversify quite a lot. Yeah, I'd say that's kind of the main takeaways with the origin of primates. History, taxonomy, and continental drift. Continental drift should actually be raft drift, continental raft drifting. Anyway, so the history of primates. So again, about 60 million years ago, we first see them come onto the scene. And then something very interesting happens about 40 million years ago, where primates first kind of evolved in Afro-Eurasia on that side of the globe. But interestingly, today we find monkeys and other primates in the Americas. So 40 million years ago, there must have been a group of monkeys that got on some sort of raft, whether that was like a group of kind of like fallen trees during some storm or something, and quite literally floated across the Atlantic Ocean from Africa, the west coast of Africa, to likely the northeast coast of South America, around the Guianas area or eastern Brazil. So that's what happened about 40 million years ago. 30 million years ago is when we see the split from apes and old world monkeys. So that's that kind of split. And then ever since that time, there's been continual diversification of all taxonomy groups within primates. Just going to confirm that this video is recording. We're good. Okay, chimpanzees. Chimpanzees are the closest related primate to humans, and we're just going to go through quite a few interesting facts about them. So here are some images of chimpanzees. When they're adults, their faces are quite kind of gray and dark, but as children, their faces are quite light. And something interesting is chimpanzees, we don't do this anymore because it's quite unethical, but there used to be a lot of chimpanzees in like movies and TV shows, and they were always juvenile chimpanzees. So it created a bit of a misinterpretation that chimpanzee faces are always kind of light, but in reality, that was only because the chimpanzees that we were seeing in media and TV were these light-faced ones. Chimpanzees are most famous for their interesting social behavior. They form very advanced hierarchies in their troops. They can have troops of like, I don't know exactly, but dozens of individuals. And they have fission-fusion societies, meaning that during some moments, they'll be quite separate, kind of like mothers will be with their children, males might be on their own. But then during important moments, like group feeding events or important hierarchy moments, they'll all come together. And by important hierarchy events, that could be something like one male is trying to challenge a leader and trying to knock him off and become the leader of the group. So chimpanzees, they exhibit this almost human-like tribalism, where they'll form alliances and they'll fight, especially males. Males will form alliances with other males, and they'll attempt to overthrow the hierarchy and the dominance of other males. Interestingly, chimpanzees have some curious noises they make. So one of them is the pant hoot, and this is the classic chimpanzee, like jumping around, screaming. They're like pant hoot. It's kind of like inherently high energy. And if I'm a chimpanzee and I'm about to overthrow a different chimpanzee, I'm going to start pant hooting, and that's going to excite me and excite my allies and kind of create a mass kind of energy of pant hooting. And then once we're all kind of amped up, we're either going to fight or we're going to intimidate and force the other dominant male to back off, or I'm going to be beaten up, or my alliance is going to fold. But there's a lot of interesting social dynamics, but the pant hoot is an important component which kind of amps up that adrenaline and gets chimpanzees ready for action. There's another kind of almost reflecting sound that they make called the pant grunt, and it's like a very like low energy grunt. And that's the noise that a chimpanzee would make if they're being dominated by another chimpanzee. So if I'm intimidating a different chimpanzee, that other chimpanzee will kind of do like a pant grunt. And you can go on the internet and hear these sounds for yourself, but they're quite interesting. Another interesting component of social behavior and reproductive behavior is chimpanzees are known to commit infanticide, which is where a chimpanzee may murder the infant or child of a mother, and that is to force the mother to reproduce again, because chimpanzee mothers will typically not reproduce while they have a young child to take care of, but by murdering their child, they can reproduce again because they don't have an offspring. So obviously that's a horrible thing that they do, but that will often happen if a new dominant male may come in, and if they're particularly violent or particularly angry, they may murder infant. And that's why oftentimes when there's a lot of pant hooting going on and like the tribe is quite energetic, mothers may take their babies and kind of run away because they don't want their child to be caught in this high energy moment where they may be almost spontaneously murdered. So feeding. So chimpanzees have quite an interesting diet. They're very much omnivorous, but they mostly eat fruit and kind of high calorie vegetation, primarily fruit. They're also known to make an interesting type of tool where they stick a stick into like a termite nest, and then the termite guards will bite the nest, and it basically turns into like a shish kebab, a termite kind of, kebab, which is pretty cool. They eat nuts and they use rocks to crack them open. So yeah, they have tool use. And then what's interesting is when Jane Goodall, who's she recently deceased famous primatologist, she studied chimpanzees. She was the first person to document them scientifically using tools. And that actually changed the definition of human, because it used to be in the definition of human that we can use tools, but we saw that chimpanzees have interesting tool use. Chimpanzees will also on occasion hunt monkeys together, so they'll hunt colobus monkeys, which we'll actually discuss later in this presentation. And this is an important social thing where a bunch of adult chimpanzees will get together and they'll kind of coordinate an advanced kind of like strategy to trap, and they'll have like people chasing the monkeys and then others creating a pathway and then force them into like the kill zone. So that's an important part of social alliance building. And it's also very important when they do these hunts, who eats first, who eats the most. These are very important measures of objective spot in the hierarchy. Range, chimpanzees mostly live in rainforest zones in Central Africa. Interesting facts that we covered most of them. In chimpanzees, the size, they're typically around like under 100 pounds, but some large males can reach over 100 pounds, and chimpanzees of this size are very strong, and they're quite large, for sure. Okay, orangutans. So orangutans are very interesting. So I have two images here. This is how most orangutans look, and this is how some males look. So what happens is males and females, they go through their puberty and they kind of turn out like this, but some males, due to environmental factors, as in like they feel dominant, or whoever the dominant male was has died, may almost spontaneously turn from kind of like an 80-pound ape into like an over 200-pound ape with these enormous phalanges on their face. This is known as a phalanged orangutan. And yeah, they're quite large, and it's quite interesting how they kind of undergo a second puberty, and it's very interesting how only some do this. It really is quite fascinating. Unlike chimpanzees or orangutans, they're much more solitary. Obviously, mothers will be with their children, but other adults will be very separate, especially males. So dominant phalanged males, I don't know if I commented on this, but they're called phalanged males, and that's because their faces kind of have these like large cheeks. They assert dominance over their area, but it's kind of a little bit passive. And what they'll do is like every now and then it's called a long call, and it's where they do like a series of like like a series of loud grunts. And then when they develop their phalanges, including in their throat, those new structures allow them to resonate very powerfully. And when they do their long calls, it can be heard for kilometers around the jungle. And that's just to tell other males, both flanged and unflanged males, that this individual is the dominant one in this area, and to alert females of his position for mating and other things. Range. The range is quite interesting. Orangutans are only known to exist on the island of Borneo, which is the southern part of Indonesia, northern part is Malaysia, and then Brunei as well. But orangutans only exist on that island, and they reproduce quite slowly. and they require like very specific jungle habitats. And it's kind of resulted in their populations being extremely threatened, and conservationists have had trouble rejuvenating their population. So orangutans are extremely endangered. So definitely an animal that we may not see in the wild in the future, which is quite sad. But yeah, very fascinating primate. Next we have gorillas. Gorillas, obviously largest type of primates. Here on the right, this is a silverback gorilla. That's not a species, that's the name for males who, almost similar to orangutans, but it's less extreme, but they'll undergo kind of like another stage of development when they become dominant, and that's when they develop their silverback here. There's actually quite a few species of gorillas. There's like western and eastern, and within that there's like subspecies or other species, but they're all relatively similar, but especially eastern species are a little bit larger, and then that's where you get males like this that are, this guy's got to be over 500 pounds. Like that's a large ape. Social behavior, so gorillas, they're kind of almost in between chimpanzees. They don't have huge troops, and then they are not solitary. They live in like small, almost harem-like structures where a dominant male will kind of be around his females and their offspring. And given that gorillas are so large, predators mostly leave them alone, except for like the young. So it's the job of the silverback to defend the young. Sometimes there'll be other males who live in these gorilla harems. They're often males that are related to the alpha silverback male, but they will always acknowledge the silverback's dominance and are likely to be attacked if they attempt to mate with anyone in the harem. And gorillas, and I could have mentioned this for orangutans as well, when they try to prove that they're dominant to another male, chimpanzees will often fight, but gorillas and orangutans, being that they're so massive, it's often just an intimidation thing, and like one male will charge at another, or like show us gorillas like they have large canine teeth. They're very intimidating. They'll pound their chest, and they'll intimidate another male off. So it very rarely comes to an actual fight, because you can imagine if these gorillas fight, they start grabbing each other's eyes and nose, testicles, they can sustain some serious injuries very fast. So they've kind of evolved to almost like, I live in London, Ontario, there's a lot of geese here, and you'll often see geese fighting for dominance. And very rarely, I've only ever seen it once, where a goose will actually fight. Every other time, they run at each other and then one turns away. That's kind of what we see as well with most primates. Oh, bonobos, just gonna check my phone. Okay, bonobos. Bonobos are very closely related to chimpanzees. In fact, they were used to believed to be just like a subspecies or a population, but they are been recognized as an individual species. They look kind of similar to chimpanzees. They're a little bit smaller, and they kind of tend to have darker faces with lighter mouths. They have interesting social behavior where they do something called, they live in environments with a lot of food, so they've evolved to be less ferociously competitive like chimpanzees, and they kind of live, just talk about their range for a sec, similar areas to chimpanzees, except they're known to live like south of the Congo River, which is an area with more abundance of fruit. So they, as I kind of mentioned, they have less competition for food. And they've actually evolved, rather than having dominant male societies, they actually have matriarchies where females are in charge, and this kind of naturally reduces the violence. Very strangely, they're known to do a type of behavior called sexually affiliative behavior, where if there's a lot of tension in the group or there's going to be some sort of fight, females will kind of have sex, especially like with one another, and that will kind of diffuse the tension. So it will often be the case, like let's say I'm very angry with this other bonobo maybe like insulted me or degraded me. Some other female may come have sex with me to relax me, or some other females in the tribe may just start having sex to kind of relax the whole vibe, or I may start having sex with the person or the bonobo who insulted me. So they have this very strange, before violence, they kind of have sex. And that's just to kind of diffuse the situation. Is very interesting adaptation. It's very, very fascinating. Feeding, I kind of talked about that. Range, talked about that. Interesting facts. Like whenever we're at size, a little bit smaller than chimpanzees. Kind of in like I don't know exactly. Again, this is not accurate. This is the final exam. I'm going to say somewhere between like the 50 to 70 pounds range for adults. Okay, gibbons. So the previous apes we talked about, and again, I skipped humans. The previous apes we talked about are considered the great apes. That's the hominids. That's their taxonomic family or subfamily. Gibbons are also apes, but they're called lesser apes because they're a little bit further related to humans. And what's interesting, I've got this image of this zoomed in face on this gibbon. And we'll notice if you look close enough, I don't know what you can really make out on the phone there, but it almost looks kind of like the other apes. It almost looks like that could be me. It looks a little bit human. He looks like an ape. And as we move on from apes to monkeys, we'll really see how the face, it goes from arguably human to not really human at all. So gibbons, they have pretty interesting social behavior. So unlike all the other apes we talked about, they live in kind of pairs, like marriage style monogamy. And typically there's different species, but in general, these lighter color ones are females and the darker color ones are their males, typically their husbands if they're hanging out, and they just hang out in groups. They have territory that the two of them will kind of patrol. And they have this very interesting song they make. They duet together where the male will kind of almost like a beat with like kind of like noises like and then the female will kind of have like a song that she sings, and it's very beautiful. A lot of people may have heard it in their travels to Southeast Asia where these animals generally live. Yeah, it's very interesting, and they're quite a lot smaller. And what's interesting about gibbons is their locomotion, meaning the way they move, is the way they swing between trees, called brachiation, is very advanced. There's videos online you can watch of these apes swinging 30 plus feet between trees. They've evolved very advanced forearms and wrists and coordination, and the way they move through the trees is very gracile and very skillful. So yeah, that's gibbons. Okay, now we're moving on to monkeys. So this is the coolest type of monkey. It's called a mandrill, and then there's also drills, which are very similar, so I've added them on the same page. So on the bottom here, this is a mandrill. So mandrills are kind of tied with baboons for the largest type of monkey. They kind of live in the rainforests of Central West Africa, and they're absolutely horrifying. So here's this image of this mandrill with its mouth open. I don't know how well you can see this on the phone, but they have absolutely enormous canine teeth. If you were in a fight with a mandrill and you get bit anywhere in your body, except like your hands or something, those fangs are enough, not fangs, canine teeth, are absolutely enough to cause lethal wounds. This is a very dangerous animal, and they're documented where if a predator intimidates them, like if a jaguar, or maybe not jaguar, I can't recall if jaguars are, I think jaguars are just in South America, maybe some sort of panther or something in the jungle tries to attack them. Unlike most other primates who would just kind of run away, mandrills will fight, and you wouldn't want to get bit at all by a mandrill. It'd be very dangerous. They have enormous jaw muscles as well, so they absolutely are packing a ferocious bite. Mandrills can be very large. I believe they can get up to like 150 pounds, which for a monkey is crazy big. And you'll notice as well that they have quite a thick coat of fur, especially around their neck and head. And this makes them look even larger. It's almost like when a cat sticks up its fur, it almost, looks big. They kind of permanently look large, very intimidating. And as well, when they have this almost mane of hair, it makes it harder to identify where their neck is. And that's then typically, if I'm a cat or a predator, and I'm trying to land a kill shot on a prey, or even if I'm a mandrill and I'm trying to kill another mandrill with a bite, I'm aiming for the neck. You bite the neck, animal's dead. But when they have such a big mane, it's hard to tell where the skull ends, where the neck starts, where the back starts, and it really kind of gives them a level of protection in that you can't even tell where their neck is. Mandrills, very interesting social behavior. The females live in large hordes, which can be up to 600 individuals, which is absolutely wild to imagine. And during mating time, males, so the males are the ones with the colorful faces, they will come in and they will clash to prove dominance, and only the most dominant ones will get to mate. And what's so fascinating is the color on their faces will become more vibrant in accordance with how dominant they are. So two males will fight, and the winning male, its face will literally become more vibrant for like days on. And then the losing male, their face will literally become less vibrant. And it's so fascinating because it projects to all other individuals in the society how dominant they are. simply by the color of their face. So that to me is very fascinating. Top right here, top right, this is a drill. So they're very closely related to mandrills. They live in slightly smaller communities, and the males actually, they are involved in the society year round, not just during mating time, but they're very similar. You can see they also have this kind of redness effect on the bottom of their chin. Yeah, those are drills. Quite a lot rarer as well, so just wanted to include them. We're moving on to proboscis monkeys. So proboscis monkeys are also on the island of Borneo, but they're on the coastal parts, which are where the mangrove forests are. If you don't know what a mangrove forest is, it's a type of forest with mangrove trees, where it's basically like a tree that literally kind of gets flooded. So it's a very aquatic, a semi-aquatic environment, because during low tides, the tree will kind of be on the ground, and then during high tides, there's salt water going into the trees. It's very saline, there's some word there, saline environment, and proboscis monkeys live there. I kind of forget some of the social behavior, but I think they live in quite smaller troops. There is dominance between the males, but it's less ferocious than we see with a lot of apes, and definitely less ferocious than mandrills. They have this interesting nose. I think it's called the proboscis. I think that's where it comes from, that the males will grow, and that kind of shows how dominant they are based on the size. It's kind of like a mating signal. And as well, they do a honk. That's the type of sound they make. I'm not going to reproduce it here because I'll get made fun of. But the bigger the nose, the more it can vibrate, and it makes their honk louder. And they'll often intimidate one another with honks. They rarely ever actually throw down properly. And since they live in these mangrove forests that are semi-aquatic with a lot of salt, they've developed certain adaptations. Like, for example, they have interesting multi-chambered stomachs that allow them to eat very salty, like low calorie dense foods that their stomachs can process. That's why they also have very large guts, because they're packing a lot of hardware there to digest the foods they're eating. They also have semi-webbed hands and feet, which allow them to swim. And yeah, they're quite fascinating monkeys, only found in the mangrove of the island of Borneo. Baboon. Okay, so baboons are quite closely related to mandrills, but they live slightly further south. And more, they're very, unlike mandrills, which are very arboreal in the rainforests, baboons are more terrestrial, meaning they don't really spend that much time in trees. They're similar size, they can be quite large, up to 150 pounds. There's different species, some of them different colors. This one looks more like a savanna one, this one's a little bit more like a forest one. Similar behavior to mandrills, I believe, where the males will fight for dominance during mating season and such, and the females live in permanent troops, but I don't remember that much else, and I don't even recall if that's entirely accurate. But yeah, that's mostly everything I know about baboons. Okay, macaques. So macaques are quite a large genus, meaning there's multiple species. So here I have shown the multiple species, and here's a map. So these beige areas are areas where there used to be macaques. So there's macaques literally in United States. It looks like maybe a little bit in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Europe, North Africa. Huge range. And today we see macaques, and you may have heard like the Japanese macaque, quite famous, lives in like mountains in Japan in the snow, hangs out in hot springs, pretty cool. There's macaques around the Mediterranean, I believe a little bit even in Southern Europe. There's macaques in Africa and Southeast Asia, in the Americas, all sorts of macaques. And they're very different. It would be challenging to see one of these and be like, oh, that's a macaque. You'd have to be very knowledgeable and know about how all the different macaques look. They vary in sizes and social behavior. They're quite a large genus. Anyway, macaques. Okay, colobus. So this is also a genus. It's a little bit less expansive than macaques. These are the type of monkeys that chimpanzees, and I think bonobos as well, will sometimes hunt. They kind of have this black and white look. I don't actually know that much about them. They probably eat fruit. They probably have a similar range as chimpanzees and bonobos. They're quite small enough to be hunted by chimpanzees. They're arboreal. I don't really know much else. Okay, future scope. So if I was to revisit this topic, which I probably will in a few years as part of a future knowledge maintenance, we're going to spend some more time on miscellaneous primates, be like tarsiers, lemurs, maybe some other stuff I don't even know about. We're going to learn about New World monkeys. If you recall, today we were mostly only talking about Old World monkeys, a lot of Africa, a lot of Asia. There's quite a few monkeys in the Americas that came over in that continental raft event. Howler monkeys, spider monkeys, other types, so we'll discuss those. And then we're going to go deeper into taxonomy. I want to learn more about the genuses and the families that make up these monkeys. I know there's, or primates, there's quite a lot of nuances, there's quite a lot of interesting vocabulary, so that would absolutely be a part of the future scope. And yeah, that was the knowledge maintenance exam, final exam here. If there's anyone still watching, you can give this video a thumbs up or thumbs down and vote whether or not I should be able to move on. I feel like I did pretty well. I've been learning about primates for like 2 weeks or so. I feel like that was pretty good. Yeah, let me know what you think. If you want to, I challenge people as well to take this exam themselves. If you want to attempt this Hunter Corbel Primatology final exam challenge, where you record yourself going through this slideshow and telling me everything you know about those primates, I will absolutely watch it, and I challenge individuals to do that. Thanks.